thank you for joining us today for our meeting of our Accountability and Assurance Board. So I'm glad that everybody's been able to join, and it's good to see you all here. And a special welcome to those people joining us online as well. Can everybody hear okay? Excellent. Excellent. So shall we begin then with item number 1 on our agenda, apologies for absence. Have we got any other apologies in addition to the ones that we've received in advance of the meeting? Anybody want to give any further apologies today? Nope. Okay. Thank you. Item number 2 then. Oh, sorry, it's a bit remiss of me there, I should say. This is a public meeting, and we will be making this publicly available, so it's really important that all contributions reflect the fact that this meeting is in the public interest, and I will be asking questions on behalf of the citizens that we serve here in Gwent. So we will, of course, at a certain point, need to exclude any members of the press and public from our meeting in order to cover any confidential items that we have. But the first section of our meeting is indeed a public meeting. So, and I should have mentioned that right at the start, so that my error there. So moving on then to item number 2, to confirm the minutes and actions from the meetings held on the 4th of June. So firstly then, the minutes of the meeting. Is everybody content that they're a true record of our discussions on that date? Thank you. And then an update on actions. Is there anything anybody would like to contribute at this point in terms of the actions that stemmed from that meeting? I think we've got a few outstanding actions that need to be followed up on after this meeting. And perhaps we could look to see how we can ensure that in advance of our next meeting, all actions have been completed that arise from this meeting. So we'll move on then to item number 3 on our report and on our agenda today. What I'd like to say, firstly, before we go into this report, is that this is probably one of the most important discussion items that we will have here at this board. It's incredibly important in relation to the public perception of policing here in Gwent and the public perception of how we all work together. It forms an important part of how we work together to build trust and confidence in policing. And naturally, Chief Constable, as I'm sure you understand, during this item, there will be a number of questions that I will ask that relate to the public interest and issues that the public have raised with me in relation to this. And it's a real opportunity for officers to share here in this public forum some of the good work that's going on as well to address some of the points raised by the inspection report. And I would welcome some of that coming through in our discussions too. So, shall we start then with a presentation of the report?
Thanks, Commissioner. Yeah, so I suppose what I'd start by saying is obviously the last two reports have looked at my inspection that we had, and I think this summer's inspection report was gratefully received, and obviously I'm going to come into some of the areas that we need to improve on, but I'd like to first of all start by saying that I was encouraged by quite a bit of the content of the report. It was very, very positive to receive an outstanding in relation to the crime data integrity. We know that that's been something that policing struggled with nationally, and you only look at other forces across the whole of the country. Some are still very much struggling. To have an outstanding in that shows not just our registrar, our team, the registrar have been really tirelessly to get us into a position of about 96% compliance, especially in key areas of vulnerability as well. But also that's embedded and understood within our workforce, which I think from a transparency perspective is great reassuring for the public to know that they're ethically having their crimes reported at the first opportunity. And as a victim, I think that would be great reassuring. That was a good start. I think it would be worthwhile as well mentioning that as much as I was sort of pleased with some of these aspects, there were some areas where I felt the adequates could have easily been good. I think when I cast my mind back to our public service, the previous responding to the public assessment, we've come a long way. We focused a lot of energy in relation to our victim services assessment. It's fair to say that since this inspection, we've continued and sustained to increase performance as well, not just at the first point of contact and within the control room, where we're regularly within the top 5 of the 43 forces in the way that we deal with 999 calls, 101 calls, and have a very low abandonment rate, but also in the way that we've maintained our approach on getting our required standards and hitting our emergency response times and our routine response times. And I would say that though we got to an adequate point by the levels of the report, that's moved on again. And I think I look forward to that next being inspected, because I think that service to the public is really, really high and something that we should be proud of. The other thing I found greatly encouraging was the fact that when you think that Gwent has gone through some difficult times, it's fair to say, in relation to some high-profile cases where our culture has been called into question, whereby some previous colleagues have let policing down and been rightly dealt with. What I found hugely encouraging was the commentary from Her Majesty's Inspectorate to really acknowledge the work that's been ongoing within Gwent. The fact that we've had in our employer opinion survey overwhelming feedback to say that people really understand the aspects of the code of ethics, have real confidence in reporting things, and know that there's a safe one and a whistleblowing mechanism, as well as being overtly standing up and saying that your behaviours are as in line with the professional way that you'd expect people to work. I found that greatly encouraging, because obviously our aspiration is to have a representative workforce, one that represents the communities of Gwent, one that our own staff go out and speak to their friends and family and say we really are an employer of choice. And I found those that sort of feedback really good, and it also acknowledged the fact that we're doing that work ongoing with the College of Policing and the University of South Wales to keep that momentum going within our workforce. I want to start off by making those observations and also saying that a lot of the areas that we were assessed on have come as adequate. Again, I will stress, I think they could have tipped into good, but they are areas that we will continue to move on in a progressive way. I wanted to sort of talk about the 3 areas that we specifically have been pulled up on for requiring improvement, and a little bit about what those areas look like and what those areas for improvement look like, and the actions that we're going to undertake in the course. The 3 areas, without going into each area on the report, we've been asked to require improvement on vulnerability, on investigations and leadership. I'll take those in turn. So with investigations, that is obviously key to us. We are an organisation whereby we want to improve our services to victims when they are unfortunate to be subject to crime. We've taken this really, really seriously. We've embedded a new detective superintendent to oversee the investigative quality framework, which has got 6 principles, which cover off service to the victims, looking at perpetrator, suspect dealing with, looking at quality, and looking at investigations and outcomes. And each of these areas, and also, supervisory ownership and investigation standards. as well as assessing the risk. Each of those 6 areas have got a designated lead of a chief inspector or a superintendent. Tomorrow is the IQF, Investigative Quality Framework, launch, whereby the ACC is pulling those leads in together, not just to see that they're going to drive those touch points, but also to bring it together into one piece to make sure that they're all realising that they're part of that investigative timeline of how we're going to improve our standards there. It's a well-documented plan. I'm really reassured by the Technical Superintendent, Bill Connell, who personally briefed me on it. I'm looking forward to showing us making some improvements in this area. You will know that this is an area that, again, policing nationally struggle with. There's not a lot of best practice benchmarking out there because positive outcomes and detection rates are not where we would like them to be. Moving on to vulnerability. Again, I spoke to focus of attention here that have been picked up by the HMI in relation to our safeguarding hubs and also the way that we deal with and recognise domestic abuse and stalking and harassment, but also the way that we deal with our disclosures in relation to those matters as well. So in a similar vein, the Detective Super for Public Protection has got ownership in relation to this, pulling together a number of task and finish groups, and it will fall into place with a renewed strategy and with a renewed terms of reference to address these matters. It's something, both of those areas that will be regularly on a monthly basis. There'll be scrutiny panels on both of those areas to show progress and a timeline against what we're trying to achieve in those AFIs. And then the one area for leadership, probably the area which I would say I was a little feeling that the narrative for that didn't exactly fit the grade. The AFIs, particularly for leadership, I think could have been expected to an extent. We have had a number of changes at the start of the year. We have changed our governance structure. We've changed our vision, our mission, our operating model. I think that's all positive things. I think they're things that are really in line with what the future, what Went's public want, and our workforce needed clarity and consistency on that too. I appreciate at the time of the inspection that period of change was ongoing and that communication would be happening over time. I feel that we're definitely moving in the right direction in relation to that. We are, as a group of leaders, all giving the same viewpoint of what our force mission and vision is and how all of the areas of police are pulled together to achieve that. And I think our staff are really showing those signs of having that understanding and appreciating that things aren't going to change, but there's going to be a consistent delivery in relation to the important factors. And I think that's a key point because a lot of the leadership points picked up on understanding change and staff feedback and the likes relate to that. And our Leadership Insights Board continues to run. And our leaders go and speak to the teams regularly to find out their own feedback on things so that we can also not just put things through official governance to improve things, but actually do things immediately and understand things from the user perspective as well. And there's a lot in the report that I could individually go through, Commissioner, in each of the AFIs. I can do that if you would like me to. But I just want to give you a bit of a strategic oversight of the 3 main areas of the AFIs, really.
That's really helpful, thank you. And I would like to go into some more detail on those points as we go through this section of the agenda. So firstly, I'd really like to say that I welcome your very candid response in terms of the report. Thank you. And I'm sure the public will appreciate the openness and transparency with which this is being treated. So thank you very much for that. There are a few issues that I'd like to focus on, but I think it's really important from the outset in terms of this discussion to be really clear, as you've alluded to, that obviously an inspection is takes place at a point in time. And we have seen, and we know we've got a closer look at the performance data as we go through this meeting, and what we are seeing is improvement as well. So this is very much about continuous improvement rather than that single point in time. But I do understand and I recognise the importance of us being able to address this within the public domain. Just a few general questions then, Chief Constable, and then I would like to focus on some of those areas that you've highlighted. Do you think that this Peel report is a fair reflection of Gwent Police?
So I think at the time of the inspection, that the data that was received and looked at by the inspection team was what it is. I can't argue with that. I think the areas that I touched on already, at that time we were a force in transition. We were on a trajectory which is positive. So I think at that time, I can't dispute it's fair. It's not fair. I think there are areas that could have been pointed out a little bit more positively. If I'm honest, I feel that, being quite candid, I do feel that we've been a little bit hard done by in particular areas. I was hoping for service to the public to be good. I feel confident that if we respect it now, it would be. I was hoping that leadership would be seen as good. It actually fell 2 grades below that. I can't hide my disappointment with that, because I have challenged that with the Majesty's Inspectorate on that grading, and that did get accepted in relation to the narrative which was placed in the report, which showed us as a force embracing leadership with a lot of different ways, but didn't change the grade, which I found disappointing, especially as that consistency of delivery on that grading is not existing in other forces as well. Because I've done my research in relation to other forces and how they've been graded, and we have hit those metrics for other forces areas that they've been picked up on. So I can't, I'm disappointed by that, and I don't think that was what I was expected. But I've challenged it. I've done what I can in relation to that capacity. What's really important is my team know that that's not how I see it. I see a team of leaders who really are focused on what they do, are victim focused, public focused, caring in relation to our staff, culturally aware, professional, motivated, and they're emboldening and giving empowerment to their own management teams, and that is being mirrored all the way down the organisation. I see a workforce that's got close associations to its staff associations, has got talent management plans, is mapping for resilience and future and contingencies. So I see a lot of good leadership on a daily basis. So I did find that one jarring, fair to say. In relation to investigation and vulnerability, we've got to make improvements in those areas. And therefore, I think those plans, I'm very happy to see. I'm very happy with the ownership of them, and I will be very much looking now to hold people to account who are leading on them to ensure that we get the delivery that our public deserve. In another area of policing, obviously, we do our best to prevent all crime by having high visibility and neighbourhood approach and being embedded, and responding effectively. But when people are unfortunate enough to be victims, I want to have a platinum service. And I think the investigations quality framework is going to allow us to really do that.
Okay, thank you for that. And I have to say, Chief Constable, that I share your disappointment in the grading around leadership, because what I've seen in terms of all the changes that have been introduced and the people, most importantly, the people that are undertaking these leadership roles is you know, a real commitment to taking the force forwards in terms of the work that it does. And I share your disappointment in the lack of recognition of that comes through in the report. However, I was pleased to see, in terms of the narrative around that, the language that was used, the word encouraging comes up quite a number of times in the report, and I feel that suggests that there is a recognition that the journey and the progress is positive, even though the grading doesn't reflect that. So I certainly hope that my interpretation is how the inspectorate would see it going forwards in the future, because that's definitely what I see here. So I just wanted to make that point. I want, just moving on, I would like to touch on the point around vulnerability, particularly, and as you know, Chief Constable, protecting and supporting vulnerable people is a priority within the Police Crime and Justice Plan. So you talked about the changes to reporting structures that you've put in place around this, and the intention to develop a strategy. I'd be very interested in having a better understanding of this, particularly in relation to timeframes around this. So when do you anticipate that the strategy will be completed in relation to this? And also, just on this, just given the seriousness and the high risk nature of some of it, and there are some points in the inspection report that do highlight some issues in relation to this. Have you put any urgent, albeit temporary, changes in place to address some of that? So I was thinking specifically around some of the comments in relation to lack of attendance at child protection strategy discussions, which I think would be a concern for the public. So are there any measures that have been put in place immediately to address that?
So I'll cover the first couple of points. Just bringing you in a second. The strategy and the terms of reference are in draft format. Imminence is the answer to that. Just need to go through the formal governance mechanism to get signed off. Very much hope that I'll be with you in the next AAB.
It should be.
Yeah. So in relation to that, you are right, there are some immediate concerns and there's some immediate actions that we've undertaken since the report as well. They include specifically in relation to safeguarding vulnerable people, bringing in a civil orders officer to work with our existing stalking and harassment officer and with our joint legal services, because we want to take positive action in relation to that particular arena.
I can pick up on the safeguarding strategy meetings. Yes, is the answer to that, Commissioner. There is some urgent work that was looked at. Our head of PPU had a review done of those strategy meetings they were referring to, bearing in mind the data collection for HMIC is sometime previous to now. And what we wanted to do was look at the breakdown between police attendance and social services attendance as well. And it became quite apparent that the attendance at some of those strategy meetings didn't all fall, the lack of attendance, should we say, didn't all fall to the police. And availability of social workers, very, very stretched, same for organisations. And just to reassure you, the high risk ones are dealt with immediately in those 24 hours timelines are met. Some of those other ones that went over the 24 hours, totally unacceptable, but there's a plan in place now to make sure that they're attended by us, and also that the local authority and social services are making their commitment as well, because I think what was happening is that we were getting requests for strategy meetings very late on Friday afternoon, which was sort of typical of when they were coming in, and then there were no social workers available. So because there were no social workers available, we were able to commit to that as well. To reassure you, that is being looked at. We've got a different plan in place now within the safeguarding heads to make sure that those strategy meetings, high risk are done straight away. That's without questions. For those ones that are perhaps not so the medium risk, those are part of that plan that's ongoing.
Thank you for that. That is really helpful and very, very reassuring. Just remaining on safeguarding, just across the public sector, we would say that safeguarding is everybody's responsibility. Do you think potentially that there's been maybe a lapse in terms of that approach that has contributed to this? And I mean, just thinking about that in terms of it being everybody's responsibility, is the training that is undertaken across the organisation enough to embed that principle? Or does that need to be strengthened as well?
It is what I was going to say. Yeah.
It has been, if we're perfectly honest, I think if the public protection, child protection was in any of the incidents that came in, it's automatically thought that our public protection unit would deal with that. Historically, it is a journey, and it's taken. Now we've changed the pillars, which is we've got much better understanding now. We've got the crime, the response, and the neighbourhood. Those messages around being everybody's business are hammered home. I mean, hammered home within those pillars. The fact that they're all working in synergy now, where it was previously, before we've had this, the new structure in the force, and it was quite silo working, and that safeguarding was sort of pushed towards public protection. The training now is tailored to our new recruits coming in, not only our new recruits, but force training days as well, saying safeguarding is everybody's business. You pick that job up with whether it's child protection, you deal with it, and then if there's a specialist resource needed, then yes, obviously that would want to say that is, I would say, a start changing the approach by the force around that safeguarding is everybody's business, and it's come from the chief's messages as well, with the chief's roadshows that he's done, and the messages that are going up from your plan and the chief's plan as well.
I think just like what you said there, there's the operating model is functional now as opposed to geographical. So you've got a clear, safeguarding, responsible, like the governance, rather than someone geographically who's trying to do a lot of things with a lot of competing demands. So real area responsibility, driving on a daily basis, ensures that there's that consistent understanding across the force as well. So I really do think we're going to be making progress, and as Nikki's already said there, it's about everyone realising it's their business. As you said there, it's not about just a small niche area of policing, understanding what safeguarding is. And then once we've embedded that right across our organisation, and obviously aspirationally, we can think that into our Blue partners, we can put it to all, our public service partners as well. It's everyone's responsibility.
Absolutely, and thank you for that. I really welcome the detail on that. Can I ask, just in relation to some of the activity around vulnerability, you mentioned that you're able to increase officer resources in relation to some of this activity, particularly with regard to having a focus on both stalking and harassment. Are you assured that you've got sufficient legal resources to support you in increasing the use of preventative orders?
So this is a conversation that we've had joint legal services at the time. I do sort of empathise with the fact that they've got a lot of competing demands in the joint legal services department, just for both forces and the fact that they deal with a real that there are different types of legal responsibilities. I think it's sure with your question, that challenge has been posed to JLS because our previous situation didn't really yield what we wanted.
Yeah.
And though the individual worked very hard, and though the individual was responsible for a wider understanding by the workforce on what stalking harassment is, it didn't turn into prevention orders. As you know, that was a Welsh thing as well as white. We're seeing the green shoots of those coming through now, but I think that the investment of that is going to help them now moving forward.
Yeah, well, what we have got is a dedicated lawyer from our joint legal services to civil orders, not just stalking prevention orders, but all civil orders. We've now got a civil orders officer in place. They've been quite difficult order to navigate. Officers are not dealing with it day in, day out. So the knowledge that the JLS lawyer has is phenomenal. She sits on the vulnerability board and they go through the orders that are outstanding and trying to help and support officers to go through those. They are difficult. We are the low numbers. We know that we've only got one interim stalking prevention order in. We're no different to any of the other forces. I think there's one other force that are doing really well in that. But I'm quite confident now that that one lawyer that we've got dedicated to it. Plus, we did have a gap with the we did have stalking harassment prevention officer, and then we had a gap. We've now got that civil orders officer as well. So combined with the legal side of it and the police traction as well, that I think one of each is sufficient for the number of orders that we try to progress in force. Nia is fully on board, and I've spoken to Louise Emmett around capacity there. And I think at the moment they are really dedicated to that. So I think it's manageable at the moment with just the civil orders. We've got JLS with other things, but with the civil orders, I think the one dedicated and the one officer point is it puts us in a much better place.
But we'll monitor that. So I think the enhanced training across the whole of the organisation might lead to more demand. So we'll just that.
Okay, thank you for that. Just finally, just on that particular issue, what I would like to say is that as this is a priority for me in the Police Crime and Justice Plan, you recall that the plan sets out how we can scrutinise the Gwent Police as an OPCC. So this is an area that I will be undertaking a deep dive into in order to just get that further assurance in relation to these particular issues. However, I recognise that the timing of that is important too. And so I'm keen to work closely with officers to consider at what point during this financial year we should start to undertake that deep dive. But we will, in order to provide that trust and confidence and support that trust and confidence with the public, this is an area we'll be undertaking a deep dive into. Okay. Thanks. Just moving on, and just on that leadership point, and you've mentioned this, you've touched on this. So what we've seen is a large amount of change throughout the organisation. What I'm quite interested in is how that change is communicated. So you've talked about the change in structures, the simplification in terms of the information around that, so that everybody's able to develop a better and shared understanding of where their contribution is within this. And I welcome that. I just wanted to ask you, Chief Constable, about your levels of confidence in the tools that you use for communicating this across the force. Do you think the tools that you use for communicating change, both internally and externally, are also improving?
So I think one of the areas that the inspector picked up on was staff sometimes feeling that they were involved in change or informed of change. So I suppose in answer to your specific question, Commissioner, yeah, we utilise a number of methods to inform them of the organisational change, including different methods used by our communications team internally on the internet and through various means. And I've spoken to them also about how we can really build on that as well by putting some screensavers on our computer hardware and some visuals around stations about our new mission and vision, which we see on the horizon. And there is a need for us to do some of the investment to be able to make that effective, so that people subconsciously see these things as well. Obviously, we've got our meetings and our team went days where our senior leaders come together to hear organisational messages with an expectation that that's then passed on through their own teams. And we thread that into all of our meetings as well, so our governance structures have got clarity and follow our key metrics. So our comms is ongoing, and we try and subsequently put that into our messaging as well at every opportunity, both in our internal messages to our workforce, but also our public-facing messages as well, to show what we're trying to achieve. What's really apparent to me is that you will find some people within the organisation who are data doctors, I think is a kind way to say, on understanding where we're going as an organisation. They'll meet them now, and we give that clarity to them. But I'm really encouraged that a lot of people really understand where we are. What I think the inspectorate talk a little bit about is a survey of the employer opinion survey on how people are informed of the change. I actually think, I was discussing this with Karen earlier on, it's not the big change, it's the small changes that we need to focus on. So people understanding why at a localised level maybe a supervisor had changed or a process had changed. Simply sending an email is not enough, and simply asking someone to change the way that they do something as a task is not enough. It's got to be people orientated. So the big thing for me is even on the small decisions and the small changes that people understand the why, because they then realise the bigger picture, and it's not just about getting compliance, it's about getting people who enthusiastically understand that this is a positive change. I think that how we're going to do that is really recognise that within our new engagement board, which obviously has the focuses on the public and the victims, but an internal focus too on our workforce, so that we get better engagement of understanding on change on a daily basis, as opposed to just the big hitting changes that we've had as an organisation at the start of the year. Yeah, I think that sort of summarizes. I would just say those number of changes, I do appreciate that there was a lot of change at the start of the year. And we both expected that, because there was a new criminal justice plan, there was a new Chief Constable's delivery plan. People are obviously adopting that and adapting to it as well. But they're set now, and I would say that staff, I'm not going to be changing the mission in the delivery plan on a whim. That will mean holding ourselves tight at occasions when there might be a competing demand, but that's basic, and we've still got to make sure that we maintain our course and stay on our true north, which is to improve public trust and confidence at all times.
Okay, thank you for that. I'll just open up. Are there any questions from the team in relation to this?
Just got one in relation to the really positive progress, particularly around things like responding to the public. I just wanted to ask, obviously that comes with additional pressures, I suppose, for the people who are delivering. So as well as the pace setters and so on, is there an ongoing focus on the well-being of the staff who are providing that improved service?
Yeah, it's a fair shout, that is, Shan, and I think you as a force, we've invested in occupational health quite heavily compared to other forces. We're big adopters of national principles, our trim assessments for the staff who are in incidents are very, very good and very well fed back on. We work closely with our networks as well to give that additional welfare support. Substance Commissioners have funded the men's health programme recently so that they for the prostate cancer checks. So we try and have a rounded approach on dealing with welfare and well-being. That's very much one of the 9 themes in my Chief Constable's delivery plan, dealing with well-being, welfare, and health and safety. Yes, we monitor it closely. Very aware that we're a force that shouldn't be where it should be in relation to sickness and absence management. We've got gold group set to that as well. Very aware that there's a strong link between well-being and welfare and absence management. So something we've got to get 100% right. We've had lots of discussions as a group with senior managers on multiple ways that we're looking to improve on that, ranging from understanding the principles of UPP and having confidence to use it, right through to that occupational health support and well-being that we display on a daily basis. So it's a big part, Sian. So one that I think, again, our leadership insights approach of working with teams regularly in different places gives us an opportunity to hear at the coalface what people are facing and understanding too. But our managers also have to be alive to these conversations this week as well, alive to what are predictable potential vacancies and be able to move staff fluidly to be able to fill gaps, because otherwise we increase pressure on individuals who are trying to make up numbers. It's a long goal.
Thank you.
Hello. I just wanted to reflect on, in particular, progress around victims and perhaps an opportunity to reflect on some of the findings of the inspection report and your ambition really in terms of, in particular, making sure that, as you said earlier, victims have that platinum experience. And I just wondered whether you could bring to life how you feel that progress is being made in terms of improving performance, especially on keeping victims updated. And that feels to be something that in my role we've really struggled with police have struggled with over the years. And I wonder culturally what you think the key is to unlocking that.
Agreed, Larry. I think for me, that's an area that we hugely need to improve on. We know that when from the dedicated work that our victims have to on a small number of victims, that we can really get it right and have really positive feedback. On the wider metric, we need our organisation and all of us have to understand that updating victims is key to trust and confidence, absolutely imperative. Too long, I think, in policing, we have our staff have thought that victims don't want to be told unless they're told that a crime's been detected, that someone's been arrested, or we found their property, that they don't want an update. But actually, we know academically and locally that that's not true. Victims just want to know that we do our very best sometimes, and if we can turn around and our staff can phone up people or go to their houses or even digitally contact, depending on what method that the victim prefers, that they do appreciate the work that we've done and that we can inform house-to-house inquiry being done, forensic analysis, we've searched online, we've used information and intelligence. All those updates are really important to the victims to know the work that's gone in. And we know from the victims' health stats that people appreciate that, and that does affect their trust and confidence. Now, embedding that culturally is huge and something that we're focused on. We already touched on the 6 touch-point plan that O'Connell is going to lead on, where victims has a very strong focus. But I think also we're on the horizon of being able to do something digitally as well. So I think that the work that potentially we've got on the horizon with Salesforce will give us an ability for a far quicker update to victims on actions. So without going hugely into detail, I know Nick could expand on it a fair bit, but when an officer gives an update on a crime, the aspiration is that there will be an automatic mechanism of that going out to victims of that updates being done, rather than a reliance on someone then factoring into their day, making the phone call, and they could get tied up with something else. And that's not to excuse that they haven't made the phone call, but the phone call becomes an added thing to the digital update that they'll have already had potentially, because they want that method. So there's a whole host of things that we need to bring on, and we are on the horizon of pushing as well. Do you want to add anything to that?
No, unfortunately, I've got improvement in victim satisfaction. There's a portal which people can access. I'm still in control of the speaker somebody. I'm doing my deal. It still requires you discipline in how we are, probably more disciplined in how we update our crime reports. But the experience for the forces says it'll create some big wins for us in terms of trust and confidence. So, not the choice is right. But yeah, it is a potentially positive tool. If you get a one of those committees that bad for, I reckon.
But I think it touches on a really important point that it's not just about the fact that what it is, that's obviously the big driver is the victims have the updates and get that satisfaction level. But we'll also be creating better capacity for ourselves, because too many of our calls come into 101.
Absolutely.
Into the force control room, and 101 calls of people chasing updates, and that cannot be right from a service perspective. We obviously give our control room staff more capacity to focus on things as well.
I welcome the response there in terms of providing an enhanced service to victims, but it does raise the question of how you will continue to monitor the balance between the instant accessibility of the updates for the victims, but also that human interaction, which is what very often provides that reassurance. So I'm very interested in how you will monitor the balance there, because it is about balance, yes, isn't it? And also, just taking you back to November last year, when we hosted here the Words Matter exhibition, just thinking about victims being able to access the portal and the updates, my concern would be, and I suppose my plea to you really as senior officers, would be to ensure that the language that is used to record information on the system is considered, recognising the pressures on officer and the time constraints that people might have. I think that importantly, the balance between that human interaction, the accessibility of the information, and the language with which that information is provided is really critical going forwards. So how will you monitor that?
I agree with those concerns, Commissioner. I think first and foremost, the type of crime is very important. I would not be expecting someone who's subjected to serious crimes to be just getting a digital update. That is not something that is ever in the plan or intentions. I think the monitoring of the use of it will be essential. There will be guidance that will have to be given to staff in relation to how you go about doing that. The sensitivity of language is a very pertinent point, because I think we don't want people just thinking this is a task. This is big. People need to realise that the updates that they put on there, they've got to be people focused. They've got to be victim focused in the way that we do it. We're a victim focused organisation. So those aspects are really, really key. And I think at the moment, this has not been financially signed through and gone through the points of delivery, and obviously we will be approaching that in a way whereby we can show that this is really best value and best practice and a must for the force. But I just think it's an exciting opportunity if the budgetary aspects are in line with where we'd expect, and if the costs are considerably outweighed by the benefits, then obviously we would be looking to try and progress that. But it
Jumping in as well, sorry to interrupt. I think the quality of investigations and that victim care change programme being intrinsically linked is really important to what we're to the Commissioner, because I think once we get those quality of investigations and updates on our systems and officers understand that is what drives our victim updates. And I think the fact that got that superintendent to see both of those, I think that makes sure that those two are linked as well, and not we dealing with them separately. I think that, and that's a step back from the state. So we get that first, and then Sicrwydd will be as well as. I think that quality is the important first.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Any further questions from anyone? No? Okay, thank you very much for that. And of course, we'll continue to monitor performance against that inspection report as we go forwards. So we'll move on then to the next item on the agenda, which is the organisational performance report. Who would like to read?
It's a hefty document, Commissioner, but I'll just try and without diluting the data within there. I'll try and keep it as succinct as I can. So the document, as you see, will is aligned to your pillars. So, and then under that pillar, then we've got the relevant crime types areas. Sorry. So the first one, pillar 1, preventing crime and antisocial behaviour. We'll just give you an oversight first of the representative workforce that we've got within Gwent, and we're looking really healthy now with our headcount. We're looking at 366 officers in firms, takes the uplifts, etc. So really healthy, working towards a really good positive number there. The gender split there is 38% female and 61% male. That balance is getting better. It was quite stark. If we only look just a couple of years ago, I think that female representation within police officers was a lot lower than that. So we are making progress on that. And then looking at the ethnicity of officers, 3.8. Again, that looks a low number, but we are on an improving journey there as well. Our positive action team do a heck of a lot of work when they're doing the recruitment campaigns, etc., to try and make sure that we attract ethnic heritage individuals to come and join Gwent Police. Looking at police staff, then we've got a headcount of 843. The gender balance is the opposite way with police staff, and that's 68% female and 31% male. And that's probably contributes to females being able to work around working hours, etc., with childcare. So that's a split that we've usually seen in police staff, and the ethnic heritage there is 2.4%. But again, the positive action team do a lot of work around the recruitment there. PCSOs, the split is more or less equal, 49% female, 50% men. Just over 50%, so that's a really good balance there. And the ethnic heritage there is 9.1, which is excellent, really good, and that contributes to our communities as well. I think being able to go out and deal with our communities and represent Gwent Police there. Special constables, that is a bit of a journey that we're on, not just for Gwent, it's right across the country. Very, very difficult to recruit at the moment. Audience on numbers is starting to improve. We've had we've been this summer now doing summer schools, trying to work around people's. It's very hard for people to come in and do training when they're working as well. But we have got a dedicated cohort now, we're up to 55, which is pretty good. There's a bit of a disparity there with females, 23% and 76% male. So we're trying to address that balance. But it's a slow journey, but we are starting to see some green shoots there. And then looking at our cadets, there we've got 119, and the balance is more or less very good. There's 51 and 48, so we've got a really good balance of our gender split there with the cadets. As we said, I said earlier, we split now into the crime, the neighbourhood and response. So the split on the response is the biggest, that's just over 590 there in response, 407 in crime and 200 in neighbourhood. So the balance there is done on a lot of work by Karen's team, the prep and the operating model journey that we went on. But this is now starting to settle down, and we've got the numbers where we think they should be. So how do you want to go through this and questions later, or?
I would like you to do that, but I'd really like to comment on what you've just explained in terms of the staffing and resources, and particularly I'd like to focus my comments on the information that you've provided, or should I say the evidence that you've provided in relation to the gender balance across the workforce. I really welcome that. It's incredibly encouraging. And I'd just like to reiterate, really, the comments made by the outgoing Merseyside Chief Constable in relation to women in policing. And it's very positive to see that we are taking such a positive approach here in Gwent, which completely dispels the myths that are being perpetrated, the myths that are being, or the disinformation and misinformation that is currently being spread in some parts of the public sector in relation to the role of women in policing. So it's really positive to hear from a Deputy Chief Constable who's female, the balance that we have here in Gwent. And I hope that that really good work continues, and those people who fail to understand the actual evidence base in relation to women in policing may perhaps learn some lessons from this. So thank you very much for that.
On the back of that, not in this report, but we do have in Gwent recognising succession planning, particularly for females in more senior ranks. We've got a female flight path, which myself, the ACC and the Chief Inspector said hold meetings to look at barriers that females perhaps find in trying to come up the ranks. So that's something that we've recently put in place. So that's dispelling another.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay, so if going on to just an overview of the quarterly summary. And this is quarter one. So we've had a total of 14,661 crimes, the total volume there. And if I put them in the top 5, really, violence without injury accounts for the top. I'm going to have a little bit more detail now. Public order offences is number 2, criminal damage and arson 3. Violence with injury is the 4th, and shoplifting is the 5th. So what I will say with the top one, violence with injury, that covers quite a lot of offences. So that is probably where we see our majority of our officers dealing with the incidents there. So looking at the solve rate at the moment is 11.7, and when we look at that, the top crime there, we've got a solve rate of 9%. The second one is 6.5%, third is 6%, the fourth for violence with injury is 13.5%, and shoplifting is 33.3%. Now we've seen a bit of a turnaround with shoplifting because that was way at the top. So we've seen vast improvements there really with the work that's ongoing. So that's just an overview, and I'll go into some more detail within the report. So looking at the perception survey for engagement there, and that is starting to show really it's been a difficult journey on this, because what we're looking at now is changing the question set. If they haven't already been changed, but I think we've used the same question set for a number of years. We've questioned within the strategy boards and board meetings, do we need to revamp these questions that are going out to the public? And I'm looking at this now, I think we're starting to see a little bit of some green shoots. It's not where we want to be, but I think what's positive is now we've got the social media accounts for all the local authorities, and we've started the engagement and communication two-way, and that will be up and running, I think, probably by October. So I think that will probably give us a leg up with some of the perception surveys as well. So looking at some of the detail layers. And one of the questions overall, how well do you feel informed about what web police is doing in your area? The fact that that's going down is positive. Don't feel, that's going down. Don't feel 57%, and the ones that feel informed is going up 38%. Audience from 56%. It's not ideal. Not where we want to be, but there's a lot of work ongoing around the communications, the neighbourhood strategies, etc., to make sure we've got that engagement with the communities as well. So the looking at overall local concerns and confidence, overall confidence there, 62% agree that they have confidence in when police. That has been very static for some time. So again, what I've just said, hopefully we'll start to see some improvement there. And then don't have confidence, 15%. That's gone down very, very slightly, just 1%. So it is frustrating, and we want to see these figures much better. But I think the work that's ongoing now, it is early days. The new neighbourhood strategy will all sort of feed into hopefully getting some improved data with this. So, any questions from?
Just a couple of points, really. So, you know, it's very good to hear you talk about it, and of course, we understand that the information that you get is only as good as the questions that you ask. So it's really important that those questions are the right questions in order to help you gather that evidence. But I just wanted to say that in relation to public perception, and certainly communication with the public, what I've noticed over the summer, as I've attended a huge number of events across the whole of Gwent, is the importance of the role that our PCSOs play within our communities. And we've seen a real, through our social media channels, it's really positive to see that that connection is being made between the work that they do and wider communities, so people can see that the PCSOs are an important, they don't just perform an important role, they are part of the communities that they serve. And that is very evident, and I'm confident that that will continue to grow, given the approach that you've taken to that through the neighbourhood plan. And I just wanted to emphasise that, really.
And the restructure, of course, we've got PCSOs in each room now. Okay, so looking at overall crime, 1,461 crimes reported during the first quarter. That is 4.3% of it's a reduction of 4.7 on this time last year, which is equates to 731 fewer. So it does seem to be a seasonal trend, but over the last, I know this is quarter one, but over the last couple of months now through December, we've seen that go through the roof, not just with our force, but I think it's right across the country. So looking at that, the overall solved rate is 11.7%. It's been quite static for some time at that level. And that's a reduction actually of 2.8% when you compare it to the previous quarter. And we've also gone down 1% since this time last year as well. This is something we are focusing on. Part of our investigations, the investigations work, and making sure that that investigation quality is also there to make sure that we get into the crimes. We're attending our attendance times, but the investigations and the solve rates should start to improve and match. There's quite a lot of work ongoing with that. So we look at that on a weekly basis, at pace setter as well on a pace of the week, just to make sure that we are all the senior officers are cited on that. So we've got the investigation improvement project, which is ongoing, which we've mentioned. and the project also aligns with the investigation standards plans as well. So there's a lot. So I think there was some trepidation, shall we say, from officers around when we are asking them to hit our target times for getting to calls, whether the quality of the investigations would fall by the wayside. And that's the job that the superintendent that's covering the investigation standard is looking at as well. Whether there's supervisor reviews on there, whether there's investigation plans on there. So this will then correlate hopefully to making that solid. So there's a lot of work ongoing in the background. Looking at overall incidents, huge number, quarter one, 49, just under 49,500 incidents, which represents an increase of 7.4, which is an additional £3,500 additional incidents when compared to the last quarter, and an increase on this one as well. Now there were 12,900 of those were assigned as private category. So I think it's really important that we see that demand that's coming through the door. There's not so this is set as 6.1 for crime for the overall incidents that come through the door, which shows that demand is huge actually coming through the door. Not all of it ends up as a crime. And I think that's the reduction on last year, actually, of 3.1% on that overall incident. So looking at antisocial behaviour, total of just over 3,500 incidents classified as antisocial behaviour in quarter one. That's an increase of 15%, equates to 466 additional ones. And what we from the quarter before, but what is more prominent is the increase is 21% from this time last year. So we're seeing a lot more antisocial behaviour, which is another 619 incidents coming through the door there. So there is a positive to this. Now we've got the breakdown for where those the higher local authorities. Newport is number one there with 30% percentage of the antisocial behaviour there. Caerphilly, then Torfaen, Blaenau Gwent and Monmouthshire being the lowest where we see the antisocial behaviour. I will say that we've had lots of operations ongoing. Now, since June, we've had the community action team up and running, targeting antisocial behaviour and looking at areas where we are seeing these increases from a tasking process, looking at the 3 or 4 month turnaround in that area, specifically looking at targeting antisocial behaviour. The next slide I want to give you an oversight of how positive and fruitful it's been. They started up in Blaenau Gwent, and they will be going to different areas across the force. We've seen off-road electric bike spaces. We've seen users driving. And these are the things that hit the communities. I think it's perhaps not always the most serious and violent crimes. These antisocial behaviour that right on the community and really wears them down. So I think the social media response that we've had from the communities that the community action team have been in have been really, really positive, saying we targeted actually what is causing them a lot of issue. If I just give you the, and this is only since June, the community action team results there. They've recorded 35 offences. They've got a solved rate, given the force solved rate is 11%, they've got a solved rate of 40%. So they are well up there and doing some fantastic work. 22 vehicles seized, 30 arrests made, and 33 stop searches performed. Now that is only between the 9th and 30th of June, so it gives you a real insight on how much impact that community action team is making right across the board. Blaenau Gwent at the moment, but it will be in all the areas of the force. So I think, you know, if we're just looking at 1 month there of that, I think the results that we have for that ongoing is going to be really good.
It's really positive to hear that, and it's good to see that those results, those outcomes, positive, I think, for our citizens as well. So the Chief Constable and I, as you know, have both engaged with representatives and communities that are affected by this, and we do understand how people feel about this and how it affects their day-to-day lives. So it is really positive to hear that. I'd just like to ask you a couple of questions on this, if I may. So we talk about the increase in antisocial behaviour, but is this actually an increase in the number of incidents, or is it an increase in people's confidence in terms of reporting incidents of antisocial behaviour?
It's the latter. I think people are more, now they've seen our teams, the restructure, the neighbourhood teams are more visible, including the CAT team. We've also got Operation Lockwood, which is running for antisocial behaviour as well, and those are out on full control. I think approachable.
Yeah.
Now I think that confidence from the public is massively increased, which is you know, correlating with the more reports.
And just on the number of incidents recorded, I would really like to ask you, how effective has Right Care, Right Person been?
We are on a journey with Right Care, Right Person, I think we're maybe the authors of our own success on this one, because we've got the mental health triage team in our control room, which not a lot of forces are fortunate to have. We are not seeing the improvement stats that other forces are seeing. It's starting to improve, but I think because we've got that untapped resource within our control room, then I think our officers are more likely to go to get the information from our mental health team,
Yes.
the mental health triage team there, which sometimes deflects some of that requirement for Right Care, Right Person and directing that. Stats are improving. I think the attendance and we've got really good buy-in from our partners in the phases that we've gone through with we've done 1, 2, 4. I think this 3 is in transit around transport, etc. But if I'm honest, we're not seeing the benefits that other forces have.
I'd add to that as well. I don't disagree with Vicky at all, but I think we've got a renew impetus in relation to strategic stakeholder engagement as well. I worked the control room on Saturday night, covering the console for 9s. I was surprised at those 9s calls. Some of those were coming from colleagues in Welsh Ambulance Service, which were, for me, within their remit as opposed to policing. Individual in the control room dealt with it, where the allocated resources effectively pushed back at the right places. But still something that concerned me greatly, if I'm honest, because the initial challenges, then the secondary updates will have you, but there are some things that were then added which would have pushed it into a policing context, but the initial account was not that. It was more of a health issue, and I think so. Therefore, we got to have a real clarity with our colleagues in other services that RCRP is not a nice to have. It's something that should be adopted really and delivered on a consistent, regular basis really.
That's really helpful, thank you. And I was it's just that connection to the number of incidents. Very helpful, thank you.
So we've got to make our communities safer. So 999, this is a positive story, as Chief was already said with the HMRC. We've seen 999 demand has risen by 11% during Q1, which equates to 2,351 additional calls. And that's a rise of 1.6 compared to Q1 25-26, the same quarter last year. So we are seeing a quite a demand. And if we look over the last couple of months, we've seen our demand go up even more there. That, however, saying that, our service level has remained really, really good. At the quarter one, standing at 97.4%, which is absolutely brilliant. And we've actually stayed above the national target of 90% for the last 8 consecutive quarters, which is fantastic performance there. And we are, so we're one of the top service level. So we monitor that on a daily basis through pace setter as well. So that's twice a day actually, for 5 o'clock and 3 o'clock as well. Another positive story with 101 demand, looking at that as a 10.6 increase for quarter one of this year when we compare it to the quarter previously, which is 6.5, just under 6,500 calls, which is a huge amount, and a significant increase of 18.6 when compared to last year, which is another just over 10,000 calls, which is a huge demand. Again, really positive. Our abandonment rate for 101s for quarter one, 7.2. When we were seeing, before we had put all the measures in place, I think we were seeing it up in the double figures, 20s, 20 over 20. So we're constantly keeping it. Now we've got a trigger that if it goes above 10, we're questioning why. There's usually an answer there, but you know that is really consistent, really 380%, which is fantastic. So the demand in there is absolutely huge.
Just on that, and I would agree, we've seen some excellent performance, absolutely excellent. You know, a really outstanding example of good practice, I think, in the way that you've addressed this as well, and that could be highlighted to those police forces who perhaps need to deliver their own improvements as well in relation to this. So that's a really positive reflection. What understanding do you have in terms of that significant increase in the demand for 101? Do you have an understanding of the drivers for that, or?
There doesn't seem to be any themes. We look at that constantly. It's not just us seeing when we've seen that. It's right across the country. There's an absolute increase. And it's even when we look at the next quarter, when we look at that, it was another big increase as well. We've seen up to 500 calls coming through the door on a daily basis, haven't passed a month or so. But no, it doesn't seem to be theme. A lot of it is mental health, people in crisis. We do see that a lot of those types of calls coming through, because you see from the incidents and the ones that are crime, there's a stark difference there. I think it's just the mental health. People come to us for when they are desperate. I know that's 101 demand, but there doesn't seem to be anything significant.
Just in relation to that, and thinking about some of the social challenges that we've seen reflected in the media recently, which actually none of us want to see. But considering how people in communities are interpreting some of the information, is there the potential for those concerns at the community level, particularly driven by social media, to perhaps be influencing that level of demand as well?
There is, and what we're doing with that now, we've really recognised, particularly around the triggers the lead for Operation Lest, which does create quite a bit of demand for us on sporadically. And what we are doing now, working with corporate comms and making sure that when information is going out from the public on social media, that we're on top of it straight away, and we are closing that down, putting statements out to say this is incorrect, this is not, this is misinformation, whatever. And I think we're working with our local authorities as well to make sure that that is a joined up effort. because not all of it falls to policing, some of it is specifically local authorities, you know. So I think that we've done that more recently in the last couple of weeks to make sure that that information is stamped on straight away, which will then have an impact on our demand coming through the door.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So looking at the 999 and the 101 average answer, there again, you know, how many times I'm going to say it's a really, really good positive story there. We've seen a vast improvement in that. The answer speed 999 is 3 seconds, and the average answer speed for 101 is 1:15. So it's a massive improvement there. Going on to our response times, which we again we've monitored really, really closely. A little while ago, the team went up to visit Cheshire, who were getting this right, getting around the response times. Now we were accepting, I would say about 18 months ago, 40% attendance as the norm. We had a real critical look at that in conjunction with going up to Cheshire, the team, and we made some significant changes in the way that we were looking at this. And what we have now is a base level of 80%. And what I will say that we are constantly meeting that. Don't be wrong, there are occasions when the demand and resources go line and we are dipping into that a little bit. But because we monitor it twice a day, I think we're on top of it and we understand now where our issues are. We're able to move resources around and respond to it really quickly. But if we look at this for Q1, the compliance rate for emergency was 81.4% and the priority was 86.2%. And we're seeing those levels and above. Some days we are looking at the 90%, which is absolutely fantastic. There's some tweaks that we still need to make because we've got a lot of new officers and new light trained, etc. But that will work through the system. But at the moment, our response times are very good. Very good.
We were not even resting on that though. Nicky, really, when you think of what blind and wet, for example, we know that blind and wet and Monmouth, we've sort of struggled a little bit in those areas for emergency response times. We've done a deep dive in blind and wet and realised that the base that we were using for Tredegar for response officers needs to be adjusted to be going from Brynmawr and Tredegar. We've got the technology to be able to do that. We launched that as of last Monday. So that'll no doubt see an improvement in emergency response times at blind and wet, which will contribute towards this bigger figure as well.
Okay, so moving on to multi-serious violence, this covers homicide, grievous bodily harm, and causing death by dangerous driving. So we have a total of 155 crimes classified as most serious violence in 2021. That is an increase of 8.4%. Just to reiterate, the numbers are low, so that's an increase of 12 offences. But we've seen a reduction of 11.4%, which is 20 fewer offences when compared to the same quarter last year. The solve rate for Q1 stands at 19.4%, and that is a reduction of 13.5 percentage points. Some of these investigations can be very complex and protracted. Just to have that. We've got a homicide and serious violence meeting, so they look at all these this category of crimes. They oversee the investigations and look at the performance in this area particularly. So we've got that dedicated. We've got a homicide strategy for the force as well, and the most serious violence is investigated by our crime pillar there. So it goes into the CID department. So that scrutiny is there and the oversight there with those. Serious violence, that's Section 18 offences and Section 20 there, including blood intent and personal wrongdoing. We've had 259 crimes classified in that category recorded for Q1. That's an increase of 25.7 again, the caveat on that is 53 additional offences, but it's reduction of 3.4 when compared to this time last year. So the solve rate for this is 18.9%. That's a reduction of the solve rate by 8.8%, and that is an increase, conversely an increase of 2.1% when observed with so not where we want to be. The solve rate on these is monitored really robustly, but a lot of these are applications for investigations and complexity, as I said, and length as well. But there is oversight and real scrutiny and both policy violence and civil violence. Going on to knife crime. Q1 of this year, we saw 76 offences before we looked at that knife crime criteria. That's the lowest that we've seen within a 3-year time frame, which is representing actually the numbers are low on this one, so it is a reduction of 0.6. It's a true offences figure. But the most prominent reduction is 23.2 offences comparing it to Q1. So the fear of knife crime, I think, is quite topical with communities. But I think when we look at these figures, stop and search is a very proactive tactic. We've got controlling coercive powers meeting, which oversees all the stops to make sure that we are doing this correctly, and where we are finding knives that those areas are the intelligence is making sure that goes through our tasking process. And there's also a pilot to educate children and young people on the dangers of knife crime, which is a virtual reality.
Yes. I've seen it. Yeah.
Yes. So there's a lot of work. We've got obviously Operation Lockwood as well, which there's the antisocial behaviour, but they look at any knife crime as well. So the numbers are plateauing, not increasing at the moment, which is a positive, but that's picked up as well in homicide and senior violence. So this is starting up. We've also got the data now we get from the hospitals around any knife crime incidents there, so we can correlate that with some of our performance data as well. Looking at drug offences then, we've got 465 crimes for Q1. That represents an increase of 8.4, which is 36 additional offences, and a 13.4% increase when you look at it compared to last year, which equates to 55 additional. Solve rate for Q1 stands at 48.6%. That's a slight reduction of 6.4 when compared to the previous quarter, and a reduction as well of 6.3 when looking at the same quarter last year. What I will say about the drug seizures, we do tend to see peaks and troughs of these when we do operations, when our organised crime unit are doing operations or warrants, etc., with our neighbourhood teams as well. So we do tend to see spikes and peaks and troughs within that. But overall, I think the detection rate on that, or the solve rate, should we say, is slightly dropping, but we do see that increase, as I said, with as we do the operations as well.
Just on that, this is an issue that it's a blight on communities, isn't it? And in saying that, I recognise that when we're talking about how this impacts on communities on a daily basis, that is somewhat different from the large-scale logistics businesses that organised crime groups establish. The reality is those large-scale operations actually affect people's lives every day in communities where they see this on their street corners and in their people driving up, we all understand the processes around this. In fact, only yesterday I was talking to some people who expressed their concerns to me about what they saw as a significant increase in this in their community over the summer. So 10, 15 times a day, people turning up, actually, sometimes with children, with their children with them, to carry out these exchanges in broad daylight. And many of our citizens across our community, Seal and Gwent, are having to live with this on a daily basis. What work is being done to provide assurance to those people in communities that actually, although they may see this every day, that there may be ongoing work around this, ongoing surveillance, covert surveillance perhaps, that there is an understanding from Gwent Place of the impact that it has on people in communities, because we talk about the figures, and the operations are always positive, aren't they, in terms of the outcomes. Some of the sentencing in relation to this is also what we want to see, but on a daily basis, what assurance is there for the public?
With that board, if you look at our social media and our comms that we've been putting out over the past 6 months, massive increase in building the confidence of communities that we are dealing with and addressing this. And I think that also gives, if we look at the intelligence submissions that come in, majority of the ones, the highest amount that we're getting onto roads. And I would say the people that are putting the most in are PCSOs, because they are the root really. They're out on the ground, they can see it, they're getting all that information from the community. And I think the fact that we are dealing with it more proactively and putting it out there as well with results builds that confidence that we can report to, and it's showing the community that we will look at it. It is, you're right, it is a blight on communities, and it's, some of the impact that it has on families is really tragic. But I think we are starting to see an increase in reporting, simply because of our proactiveness on social media.
I think it's a very old phrase that if you don't have a drug squad, you don't have a drug problem. We haven't got a drug squad per se, but we've got a proactive team who go out there and hunt on intelligence. And as Nicky said, the PCSO intelligence submissions are rising. The community confidence, the reports, therefore there. So I wouldn't like to say that I don't necessarily read this one as a rise being bad news. It shows robust activity in disrupting OCPs. I hear what you're saying in relation to that confidence. I think the success, hopefully great success in relation to what we do on the social media. Certainly the stuff that we do, we're going to do when neighbourhood matters, launches as well. We'll get relevant messages out to people with activity we're undertaking, which will hopefully encourage them to report things as well. It's a constant thing that we've got to keep on top of to have people understand that they sometimes people are understandably worried about reporting things overtly to us. There is single online home. Unfortunately, again, there is Crime Stoppers, which anonymously can give us that sort of information. So, yeah, it's go back to your question. I think the PCSOs play a big part in relation to that visibility, engaging, constantly.
Thanks for that.
We're going to share with this is a positive story. Quarter one, about shoplifting offences were reported, which is a reduction of 7.1, which is 81 fewer offences, and a further reduction of 25.3% compared to the same quarter of last year. So we've seen a significant drop there. The solve rate is currently stands at quarter one at 33.3, and that's an increase of 2% and 4.2% from increase from last year. So how have they done this? Well, the management of repeat offenders has played a big part of that. application of criminal behaviours, orders, push charge, design out crime officers working alongside our retailers to reduce opportunism. So there's quite a lot of work. We can be in the process of doing a retail crime strategy and implementing retail crime reduction partnerships across the local authorities. So that is quite a positive story for reducing the number of shoplifting. But it's something that we have to be on constantly. Because again, this is seasonal. This is also where these measures in place.
We probably could do a little bit more in relation to celebrating this somewhat, because I think what you will know is that we're probably a bit of a national outlier in a positive way on this. The national media footage is very much recording rising in shoplifting in many port areas, quite profile stories, and it goes down to perception again, doesn't it, about shopkeepers. Probably asked him when would say they wouldn't actually probably repeat the facts. They think that there was an escalation based on the wider national picture. There's probably a bit more we could do in relation to communicating some of that success, I think.
I'd really like to see that. As you know, retail crime is the focus of the Police Crime and Justice Plan, and it's really good to see such positive performance here. Just it's good to hear about the work with the retail crime reduction partnerships. But how will you just in working to establish those and hopefully continue the good work around this, how will you ensure consistency across grant in relation to that?
Sorry,
how will you ensure the consistency across grant in relation to those partnerships? Who's got oversight of that?
Jason White, who's the Chief Super now. And I think what makes it a lot easier now is the pillars. So that we've got, we're not east, west, it's a forced approach. So whatever we're doing in one areas, it's a forced approach, and it will be determined by so if we've got an area that is being targeted, we think there's an increase in shoplifting, that they can divert resources to that area, so it makes it a lot easier that we've got the bill structure.
I think it assists in really truly having a problem-oriented policing approach to this. And I think, as Nick said, we've got that consistency across the board now. Best practice in one area being adopted by others. I think we've touched on it already. Big focus of attention and successful management of peak offenders, isn't it? Really targeting those individuals. It is the basics of the triangle of problem policing, isn't it? You take one of those points out, we have got a problem triangle. The targeting offenders being one of those points has removed that problem. And using the community resolution type things that we've got into.
Thanks for that. I am really conscious of time, and there are some items that I'd like to ask some further questions on. So if we could just,
Residential blue there, and 370 for 1 there, which is an increase in 12, 3.4 increase, but a reduction on this time last year. Salt break for 41 is 7.8, which is an increase of 1.7, and again a similar increase compared to last year as well. What I will say is an improvement that do report of 88.1% of residential burglary complaints are attended by officers, and 65.4% of these within 60 minutes as well. There's an incremental improvement in that salt rate. We were looking at half of that, we were looking at 3%, which is totally unacceptable. We've got a new burglary act, we've got CID oversight now, so there's a lot more scrutiny around attendance, golden hour, etc. when burglaries as well. Okay, looking at robbery then, total of 114 robbery offences recorded during 2021. That's a significant increase of 54.1 compared to the previous quarter, which has gone past the upper control limit then to another 40 offences. Levels have also risen by 29.5 compared to last year as well. solid rate is 16.7 there, and a more prominent increase of, compared to last year, 4.2 as well. So what are we doing to address this? Well, the robbery is looked at in the homicide and serious violence meeting, focuses on robbery, and it's on the DMM documents every morning to make sure there's a robust plan around any of these that were reported. Oversight is with CID then, and so we've got that consistent approach. But that increase is something that we are monitoring on a daily basis. Theft from person, we see a reduction on this one of 8.2, obviously only 4 figure offences in that list there, but an increase of 2.3% of the last year. The solve rate, if you put on this one, is 2.2%. Very often with theft from the person, people don't want to engage, which makes it very difficult with that. But again, that's something that we are monitoring as well. Okay, so looking at pillar 3, protecting vulnerable, violence against women and girls. Overall, we've had 3,278 crimes classified as BOW during Q1, which represents an increase of 3.2 to 102 additional offences. But it's a reduction compared to last year's 252 fewer offences than last year. Our assault rate is 8.3, which is a reduction from the previous quarter of 3.1%, and a reduction of 0.7 when compared to last year. There's been some analytical work being done with that, and it feeds into the vulnerability about meeting. Looks at the disproportionality between violent offences and overall crime. And it's pleasing to say that there continues to be little disparity between BOW, so we're not dealing with those less favourably. BOW is very prominent. We've got the vulnerability meeting, which looks at BOW, and then we've got the strategy meeting, which looks at BOW and SOC as well. So we've got chief officer oversight of that. But what is pleasing that the forces rape charge is consistently high. We're on an upward trajectory with that. And the victim attrition rate for sexual offences is low because we've got our dedicated solos, etc. And we're really in the rape team. Our attrition rate for rape victims is superb. We lose hardly any victims there, which is positive. Moving on to domestic offences, 2,032 crimes classified as domestic. This represents an increase of 4.6, and a slight reduction on last year of 0.1. Assault rate stands at 8.9. This is a reduction of 3.2. I do see a fluctuation. There's no idea that we're seeing that going up and down. What I will say is this is a focus of the vulnerability action plan at the moment. They are looking got some real scrutiny around why those assault rates are dropping. The force required in all high-risk domestic offences are finalised now by an inspector, so we've got that increased scrutiny around that. And the force improvement plans, we've got the DIP sampling, the focus on domestic offences, particularly around Article 15, which is 15 disengagement then. Rape, as I just alluded to, this is a good news story in as much as the charge rate. However, we are seeing an incremental increase in reporting. It can be positive when people are more encouraged and able to report. But we do see a big percentage of those is historic reports. We've got the big historic investigations that we hold on at the moment. So sometimes we have single victims with lots of offences on there, which will cut the numbers up. But what we're looking to do is the demand in there is going up. We're going to look at doing a review just to make sure that we've got our staffing correct in there. We've been up and running 2 years now, and that increase in the demand coming in there has been incremental and gradual. So what we don't want to do is put the additional pressure on our staff. So we're looking at demand versus the costs within there. Serious sexual offences, 259 crimes classified in that category. This is a reduction actually of 2.6 when compared to last quarter, but an increase of 19% compared to last year, which is 43 additional offences. Solid rate for quarter 1 stands at 12.7. With 53 crimes solved. This is the highest quarterly figure within the 2-year time frame, representing an increase of 3.7 when compared to the previous. And we have running the scrutiny panels, which normally look at rape investigations, but they look at sexual offences as well, to pick up any issues with any of the investigations there, and that's fed back. And what we've got in place now is a daily measure looking at the non-contact sexual offending, because we know that is a precursor to more serious offending as well. So there's a real big focus within the public protection and vulnerability world to look at those non-contact sexual offences. Stalking and harassment, we've got 1,993 stalking and harassment offences were recorded, represents a reduction of 1%, which is less, and a 7.1 from the previous year. Solve rate for this stands at 7.8, which is a reduction there. Further training around stalking offences, we've had the Susie Lamper review, we've got the action plan running from that. We've now split stalking and harassment, so we've got the focus on each of those separate entities, just to make sure that our officers understand the gravity of dealing with each of those and how impacted those are on victims. So a lot of work ongoing with that. Hate crime then, 385 offences met the definition of hate crime reported in quarter 1, which is an increase of 11.3, a slight reduction from last year. Crimes with the tag of racial hate strand were the most prevalent within quarter 1, and the transphobic hate strand with the least common, with only 18 offences reported there. Solve rate for 9.4 there, which is a big reduction of 10.3%, albeit we are looking at low numbers within there. Moving on to criminals and sexual exploitation. 4 offences were assigned to a child criminal exploitation local qualifier, which is, it does look like a big reduction, 66.7 of the numbers are low here, 82 offences. Just looking at those numbers, they do look really, really low. We've done a lot of work into this around the qualifier tag on this, but this is not something that we experience within Gwent alone. We've done national work, and the tag to understand CCE is quite complex, and we're quite confident that we are capturing the offences within there, but there is a lot of work ongoing to make sure that we are making sure that those CCE and CSE crimes are dealt with appropriately and tagged appropriately. Yeah. They may be involved in a bigger investigation, which that crime doesn't get allocated to, if that makes sense. Not that qualified doesn't get. But we're looking at the KC report, and we're totally engaged with the National Child Exploitation team as well, and we're waiting for those final recommendations to come out. That hasn't stopped us putting our own recommendations in place and doing work towards some of the recommendations that have come out from the Home Office and that. And what we're looking at is the data quality issue to make sure that those, as I just said, are categorised and flagging them correctly. Missing children, missing children. 1,000, just over 1,150 missing person reports were related to the child in quarter 1. This was an increase of 18.5, an additional 180 additional when it's compared to the previous quarter, but a reduction of 8.4 compared to the same quarter, which is positive. We do see seasonal when the school holidays are on, tend to go up and down the missing episodes. But what we've reintroduced is the weekly partnership missing children meeting, which is very effective in reducing the repeat episodes of children. What we do see is we get a lot of out-of-county children placed within when
Yes.
We'll take that. But they're working with the local authorities to make sure that we are notified and there's a robust plan in place around that. Action fraud, we've seen a total of 191 action fraud occurrences there. Quarter one. That's the lowest quarterly figure within the 3 year time frame. A reduction of 9.5 compared to the previous quarter, and a reduction of 70%, which is 39 occurrences when compared to last year. On a positive, 196,540 victims' money was safeguarded by fraud investigations in Wren for quarter one, which represents an increase of 12.7, so that's an absolutely positive picture there. And we're fully engaged with City of London Police regarding action for trends and any changes that come across in the landscape there. But this reduction is not just specific to Wren, it's a national, it's a national reduction there. Cybercrime, 1,500, just over 1,500 offences reported in quarter one. That represents an increase of 8.2 compared to the previous quarter. During quarter one, 3 and 5 offence types were classified as stalking and harassment. A lot of our stalking is done online. They account for 60%, just over 60% of our stalking and harassment crimes, which is a really high percentage. But nevertheless, that we do the work exactly the same as it was any other reported crime. It's just sometimes a little bit more complicated and it needs specialist resources to deal with that. Upward trending of cybercrime volume is believed partially to do with improvements in the identification of cyber-enabled offences, particularly at first point of contact. So when they go into our first point of contact, the training that they've done in there, they can recognise them straight away, which is again a really positive movement there. Number 4, investigation timelines. This is from victims' clues. We've seen a real drop, which is positive in the investigation timelines with 23 days. This represents a reduction of 41% compared, but it is back where we were previously. We did see an increase in this, but this correlates with the Investigation Standards Board, the oversight with the framework that we are putting in. So that is something that the super is looking at. But we are seeing a positive trend on downward trend.
Just here, I am conscious of the time, so I'm going to need to bring this item to a close. I've got a question though in relation to victims, but firstly, what I'd like to say is I really welcome the highlighting of emerging issues in this report. It's really positive and very helpful in terms of the information you're providing us. We've talked about victims a lot, and we've got a lot of information in relation to that. My question really around this is around your confidence. So are you confident as a leadership team that you've got the right structures, or you're starting to build the right structures across the organisation to ensure that a victim-focused culture spreads across the entire organisation? And this links into the kind of safeguarding is everybody's business approach as well, doesn't it? I think from speaking to members of the public who've been victims, I don't think all members of the public would necessarily think that there was a victim-focused culture at this time. So I'm just interested in your level of confidence around it.
But it comes a little bit back to some of the earlier conversations really starting to, I think is a very brief way of saying it. It's a real priority for us, part of your plan, part of my plan. The reason why the victim superintendent has been dedicated to the role, and the reason why we've got a very strong one of those 6 touch points is exactly that big focus for so it's a cultural change that we're asking of our officers to really have that mind and not be task focused, but really focus on that victim care.
Thank you. That's really helpful. And just on this section of the report as well, obviously as an emerging issue, the measures that are being taken in terms of the National Early Release Scheme are highlighted as potentially presenting issues. Have you actually seen, at this stage, have you seen any operational or risk management impacts as a result of it?
The releases are starting this week. The releases. We've had early engagement with our colleagues in the Home Office, etc. We've had lists that come out as the tranches come out, we get lists of the offenders that are being released early. What we're able to do then is do internal research around them. We send our returns in on a weekly basis. As yet, the impact hasn't hit because it's only this week that they are starting, those early releases to start, the first tranches that has been out. But what we are looking at is those are monitored now on a daily basis to make sure that when they do come out, that the safeguarding is in place. That's done previously because we get the list out. So it's watch the space at the moment because we don't know what impact that's going to be. It could be a revolving door.
What lessons have you learned from the previous experience of early release? So over the past year, we've experienced this. I think from the public perspective, one of the concerns around this is that we know there are a lot of people serving relatively short sentences that for crimes where there may not necessarily be a flag in terms of risk, but actually the evidence shows us that there's a correlation between some offending behaviours and domestic abuse. So how are you managing this in terms of those partnerships? Because you will have intelligence yourselves in relation to calls to properties, but where no action has been taken going forwards. And we know that certainly we're starting to see the evidence in terms of some of the civil unrest that we've seen, where those people behaving in that aggressive manner are also perpetrators of domestic abuse. How are you monitoring that? Because I think from the public perspective, that's a real concern.
It is a concern, yeah. And we were fortunate in Gwent because when we had the last tranche of it, we didn't have a huge number in Gwent. So it didn't impact on us massively. And there's more coming out in this tranche. Albeit what I will say is though that safeguarding that we are able to do, because we get the lists out of who is convicted, what offences they have been in prison for. So we're able to put that safeguarding in, and whether we need to allocate our lots of officers, our whatever teams that are monitoring the same people as we get recalls as well. So we didn't see a huge impact last time, but I'm confident that we've got the measures in place that we need to safeguard those who are coming up. But until they are released, we've done everything that we possibly can prior.
And the map of connections
Yeah.
there as well.
The links in with local authorities is important as well because the housing is an issue.
Yes.
I mean, there's not, because they're coming out in huge tranches, there's not accommodation. So that could have an impact with communities when they are housed. But so far, we haven't seen any.
Okay.
Just got a few more. Sorry.
I think if you don't mind, we just cover off some questions now, because I think I am conscious of time. Elaine, did you have a question?
No.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. What I'm going to do is just close this here. Just it's really positive to see, I think, some great improvements in performance that across the whole organisation, and I really welcome the reporting format. I know we sat here today talking about this and discussing this, but actually in order to enable us to get to this point, there's a huge amount of work that has gone on between both organisations behind the scenes to enable us to do this. So thank you to everybody who's been involved in this. You know, and there may be some further issues that I pick up outside of this meeting, but I do need to close this at this point. So thank you for that, and you know, thank you also for the discussion and the responses around this. It's been really valuable, I think. Shall we move on then to the next range of items? So we've got a number of items now in relation to finance. And we've got 4 items here in relation to finance. Can I ask for a succinct overview on each of those, please? Right, so over to you, Matt.
Thank you, Commissioner. I will be brief. The first item up is the medium-term financial plan. So this is an update on the medium-term financial plan 25-26-29-30. It was presented as a increasing plan in January, at the end of January this year. It's an update as at the 31st of May. So in terms of what's happened in those 4 months in January and May. As is usual, every year we identify additional cost pressures that come through, and we also get clarification of funding streams, grants, and additional costs that are coming through. And what this paper essentially does is provide you with a snapshot of what those additional pressures are, what those additional funding elements are, and then provides you with an update in terms of the deficit. So, in terms of the content of the paper, the original position at the end of January was a £107 million deficit for 25-26 on funding of £183.8 million. The 5-year position was a £5.6 million deficit, going deficit. What has happened in the 4 months, essentially, is that an additional £3 million of costs have been identified, offset by approximately £1.92 million worth of additional funding. So the deficit has increased in terms of the predicted deficit for 25-26 from 1.7 million to 2.7 million, and for the 29-30 deficit position from 5.6 million to 7.1. Now, there are a number of things that have happened since May that have been identified to help us to close that £2.7 million deficit. And there are a number of things that are ongoing to do that. So if you're happy, I'll just run through those very quickly. Every month that we don't borrow to fund the capital programme, or rather yourself, but doesn't borrow to fund the capital programme, we're saving over £100,000 of interest cost. So we're avoiding that. At the end of June, in 25, we'd already reduced that interest cost by £419,000, and that is continuing every day that we don't borrow. So we've already made at least 400, probably closer to £500,000 worth of savings by avoiding the interest cost on borrowing. In addition, we've had confirmation of funding for dangerous dogs, which does relate to 24-25, but we will be receiving it in 25-26. And thirdly, then one of the additional things that we've had confirmation of is funding for the police officer pay awards. The difference between the average and the 4.2% that has been confirmed. So there has been funding provided for that. The difference between the impact on our budget is a small gain, non-recurrent gain, about £170,000. So again, so from that perspective, just since May, we've identified another £900,000 worth of savings against that 2.7 million, and that is increasing. In terms of what else we're doing to close that gap, because we don't rest on our laurels, we need to make sure that we can be as sustainable as possible. The Productivity and Efficiency Board continues to meet. We identify good practice both internally within the force, but also regionally within Wales and also nationally. Sir Phillips, the Director of Finance in North Wales, is the regional representative on that board. So he feeds that back through the regional board, and we take that forward. We have the change programme that identifies savings and then out through SID. We are stepping back up a working group that we had 2 years ago that looks at the National Police Chiefs Council Efficiency Toolkit. So we're revisiting that. We had revisited it in February. We're revisiting it again to see what else we can do from that perspective. It's a really useful good practice tool. We're already challenging through the budget setting process, which has already kicked off. Through the 26-27, so we're already challenging that through business partners and through that process. But then looking further forward, just worth flagging in terms of the 5-year outlook, the comprehensive spending review that was confirmed has also identified some growth in the police core grant over the next 3 years, which is very welcome. And I won't comment any further on that. But in terms of the medium-term financial plan, we normally assume a flat cash funding position when it comes to the police grant. We will be seeing some growth in that police grant over that 3-year period, so it's very helpful for us to be able to then plug that into the next iteration of the medium-term financial plan that will be coming through as part of this next budget setting process. So that will also help us to close the £7.1 million gap that we're currently showing. There's a lot going on in terms of that. I'll stop there and take any questions.
Thank you for that, and I welcome the update in terms of the efficiencies that are being achieved. It's really positive to hear that. I'd like to ask you about collaboration, and there's a significant growth in collaboration contributions, and I know that we've discussed this in other meetings as well, and it is positive to have been able to see very recently just the some of these collaborative projects. That's very positive indeed. Nonetheless, the some of those contributions have escalated quite considerably. So how confident are you that there's a robust link between the finance department here and the finance leads for the collaborative units, which are hosted by another force? Because being able to track progress in relation to this is very important. We're talking about public funding, we're talking about taxpayers' money here, yet some of these escalations have been quite significant. And what's your level of confidence there?
I am confident in the numbers, but there's more we can do to give oversight and governance from a monitoring perspective as a force into South Wales Police, who provide the governance to the collaborative governance. So ourselves, WHS North Wales, we feed into South Wales Police. South Wales Police attend the various collaboration boards and also the individual collaborative activity boards to provide the financial work there. So essentially they're the business partner. And we tie into them, raising our questions to them and receiving the financial information from them so that they can feed that through. Otherwise, we double up, treble up, quadruple up in terms of the time spent on attending management meetings. From a personal perspective, I think it's okay, but we need to be better at it. I think what you can see in terms of the collaboration contributions, better at it in terms of us as a finance team and support. So there is more that we can do with that, and that is something that I have been pushing that finance team to do more of. What you can see from the paper is that a number of these things, particularly the Welsh Sexual Assault Services, run on a current footing, and were put onto a current footing in the collaboration contribution. So that's why their costs have come through as a new cost from that point of view. But I don't disagree that whilst the governance and oversight of it, as I say, is okay, we could make it more robust, and we will.
Okay. Thank you for that. And that's something that we'll continue to monitor through this board in future.
What we could do, Commissioner, is take that as an action for the last piece of financial resources in which to raise across the CFO level within Wales. As you say, I think this is paid up in the annual accounts arena as well with the notification of issues. So perhaps we take that as an action that we can raise this month.
Sorry to jump in. It is reported to the finance journal on a regular basis in terms of the quarterly positions. So we do receive it as CFOs from that point of view. I think I would want to improve our monthly interactions with South Wales Police.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that. Anybody else want to raise anything in relation to that? No? Okay, thank you very much for that that update there. Budget setting timetable.
Commissioner, so I'll be brief. It is presented to members today for information. Rest assured, it's a joint audit committee this month. We've got external scrutiny, and we also present for the panel as well, so they can see the journey. There's three main things this budget setting timetable is designed to accommodate. One is the statutory deadlines, particularly around you notifying the panel of the precept and budget. Secondly, that we have a robust budget setting approach, particularly around the development of the forces budget, which then forms the operational context to your wider financial strategy, and also the tail end, the accounting gymnastics that bring together the budget precept agreement. The meetings identified in the budget set timetable will be scheduled and confirmed, and you'll note there's a change from last year around the additional strategic management board in January, where you will consider my overarching finance report. There's a few unknowns in the budget timetable as ever every year, and it's usually around the receipt of provisional financial settlements. I'll just put estimating no kind of the week. We hope for that week, but obviously some years it's a bit later, never any earlier, always a bit later. Just for comment, but again, goes to the panel and chat during this month.
Thank you. And I'll look forward to participating in the chat discussion on that as well. So just in relation to that, so over to you, Matt, I suppose. Just the level of resource in the team to deliver against this time frame. What's your level of confidence there?
The amount of resources there is the same as it has been in previous years. So we don't have any gaps in terms of the management account side, in terms of the business partners. So I'm comfortable with the timetable. Internally, we brought that timetable forward so that we're producing a budget a week earlier to enable additional review by the senior accountants, the head of finance and myself, so that we can meet that timetable more comfortably than we have in previous years.
Anybody else got any questions on that? Thank you very much. Thank you. So, end of year financial performance report.
Thank you, Commissioner. This is basically identifying the management accounts position at the end of 31st of March 2025. The headline, the highlights are that in terms of the outturn, before movements on reserves, before transfers to reserves, the outturn was £5.7 million underspent. However, that does include releases from reserves to fund capital programs and various things. So the key element really is around paragraph 3.3, which talks about the underlying position, so before reserve movements. And what you can see from that is that against a total funding requirement of 173,027,000. The underspend against that taxpayer funding, if you like, was only 400,000, which is really positive because that means that we've managed to land the jumbo in 6 months. And there are a number of elements in terms of the pay and non-pay variances which are set out in the report, but I won't go through them in detail unless there are any particular questions on various elements. What they do, not in a huge amount of detail, I won't say. In terms of that 5.7 million, there are a number of one-off elements that have contributed towards that. One of which is some changes in accounting estimates, the way things have been treated within there. We benefited from slightly higher interest rates than we were expecting for the year. They held up over the course of the year, so that gave us an extra 1.1 million. Not borrowing, again, helped us to save £1 million from that point of view. And similarly, in terms of the force control room project, the conclusion of that resulted in a £1.4 million receipt as well. So from an underlying perspective, we're there or thereabouts. We benefited from some non-recurrent elements. And the various variances are highlighted in Paris 3.4 right through. In terms of key points I would make on things, on the other elements, all of that 5.7 has been repatriated back to reserves in full. With discussions with the CFO in the Commissioner's office. And then in terms of the balance sheet, what you can see from a cash perspective is reducing investment, reducing interest rates over the course of the year. Debtors and creditors, cash management is good. It's on target. Is it too good? Maybe we could stretch things a little bit more, perhaps in terms of creditors. Maybe we could, but there's always the local supplier perspective and not wanting to cause any undue harm. In terms of the capital projects or capital programme, the actual spend was 16.7 million against a revised budget of 22.5. Was due to some slippage in timing of deliveries in terms of vehicles, but also in terms of some ICT projects and the fforwm I mentioned previously, but also the Joints 2 project, which will happen, it's just slipped a little. Further detail is then provided in terms of our seed money progress, in terms of processing that, and also in terms of the reserves, the earmarked and cash reserves that we have. They've reduced again year on year from 21.1 million to 18.1, 18.2, from 2.1, 3.1. But that essentially is because we funded the capital programme, and Darren's funded the capital programme from reserves as opposed to borrowing. The general reserves have been maintained at 5.5 million within that 18.1, and that's in line with the reserve strategy. I think that's pretty much all I wanted to say on that, Commissioner, but I'm very happy to take any questions on detail.
Okay, but thank you for that overview. I haven't got any specific questions because we have discussed this at length in another meeting, but I would like, there are a few points that I'd like to make in relation to this. So I really feel that this is the appropriate moment to say that I'm grateful and appreciate the work that Chief Constable has done in his national role in terms of leveraging additional funding in relation to dangerous dogs. I'm sure that other police forces welcome that as well, whilst it is it's not at the level that is needed. Is certainly welcome in terms of offsetting some of the costs. So I'd like to put on record really my thanks to the Chief Constable for his work in relation to that. And as I was going through the report, something else that I'd feel needs to be recognised in this meeting as well is the Finance Department's work in reducing the overall debtors figure and achieving creditor days of 16.49 days. That's really, really good work. And sometimes I think, you know, we're looking at the budget, we're looking at the figures, the finance, And once again, going back to the point about the effort that goes into assembling the information for these meetings, that is excellent performance by the team, and I do hope you'll feed that back, because that is really positive. And I think very often, especially in large organisations, sometimes groups of staff working in particular areas, sometimes their efforts can be overlooked, and I think it's really important that we acknowledge and recognise the really good work that's been undertaken there. So thank you. Thanks. Has anybody got anything they'd like to ask on that? No? Okay. Next item. Matt.
Back to me. So following on, we're now into Q1. We're actually into Q2, but in terms of the results for quarter one, caveat on this report. Caveat being that the phasing of the budget and some of the timing of it needs to be completed. So as I talked about in terms of the underlying position against expenditure, that's the key number to focus on. So in terms of the financial highlights, the year-to-date outturn is currently showing a £12.6 million. However, the timing of the Home Office's Welsh top-up grant within the budget has been phased over 12 months. It was received all in month one. So we need to reflect that, and that's an adjustment that we will make for quarter two, so that we don't end up with a continuous position from that point of view. Similarly, there were some additional elements around reserve movements, which again have been phased over the course of the year, but actually were a month 12 adjustment. So there will be no movement over the course of the year. So we just need to amend the budget for that. I will come back to that. But when you look at the underlying position against net expenditure, we're looking at a £352,000 underspend, quarter one, which again is keeping everything as tight as possible to what we were expecting. Again, there are a number of variances that are highlighted in terms of pay and non-pay. You can see that the pay variances from an officers and staff perspective is there or thereabouts. Over time, there is an overspend of just over £500,000. There are elements of that are collaborative, which come back through the collaboration contributions. There are elements of it around timing differences for bank holidays. There is also an element related to operational output as well, because that is funded solely through overtime aspects. That is, as I say, cost neutral to us. Because we receive it, so that there are aspects of that. In terms of the non-pay variances, again, because it's quarter one, we often get quite a lot of timing differences between month 3 and month 4. So it's really a case of if some of our suppliers manage to get their invoices out in time, or they've passed their funding through in a month or a week later, it can have quite a big impact in terms of the Q1, Q2 position from that point of view. And that's essentially what you're seeing in the non-pay elements there. I fully expect most of that to come back closer to budget as we go through the year. So I'm not expecting huge savings or huge overspends in certain areas. In terms of other movements, again, I've mentioned the capital costs already in terms of borrowing. They're underspent at month 3 by 419,000. Again, that's because we haven't borrowed. I think one of the interesting things for me is the fact that the investment income is slightly lower than we were expecting. That is a recognition of the fact that interest rates continue to be low and may drop further. So I think that's one that we will keep an eye on as we go through the year. But I think that in terms of the level of one-off non-recurrent bonuses that we had last year, the 1.1 million, I don't think we'll see those levels this year.
Okay.
In terms of the balance sheet is pretty much as it was, as you were in terms of performance. Debtors, creditors is where we would want it to be. And then in terms of the capital programme, it is there is a revised budget from 22.5 in January through to 18.3 million now. It's largely as a result of some of the clarification following the estate strategy and the discussions that we've had with Darren on that one, rather than net slippage. There are elements of last year's that we're bringing through. The reserves position is as it was at the 31st of March. Other than that, the medium-term financial plan position is also the general position. Other than that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay. Thanks. I haven't got any questions on that. We'll just continue to monitor that really closely. Could we have the light, all the lights on, please? It's Thank you. Well, that's much better, isn't it?
Did you believe you've got very dark through the finance?
No, it's not like the thought was procurement.
Okay, so we will move on then to the procurement strategy, and I really welcome this report. Is there anything that you'd like to highlight in a really succinct manner before I ask you any questions about it?
With the note that this falls off the previous 5-year strategy, that's got national. Just with no government's focus on national procurement and the expectation of the collaborate more widely. As I appreciate, there's certain elements and software, fuel, free. Uniform. So we know there's going to be projects to make sure to see that. I'll get covered in that bit. And also just around the emphasis now in the new legislation, local and national priorities on social value as well. Sustainability should probably have impacts now into the strategy. So those are the things probably that we need to think about.
Thank you for that. And I welcome the strategy, and it's really pleasing to see this, isn't it? And the progress that's been made in relation to procurement, and the recognition of the team is superb, isn't it, in relation to their award. Now, as you'll know, in terms of the police crime and justice plan, something that I highlight in there that's very, very dear to me is social value. And I was just hoping that you'd be able to give me some examples of the types of social value that that you plan to deliver through this work that will positively impact our residents here in Gwent. Because, well, I think you've all heard me go on about this at length. It is something that's very important to me. I really welcome it in being embedded in the strategy, but. Can you just give us some examples of that?
What's important for us is
yeah. Yeah.
Local suppliers on time, so where we are utilizing national providers and they're using local contractors for our tools to make sure they're providing payment on time, so it's really important for businesses looking to get that cash flow in from large companies so they don't get money. So I think it's those types of interventions, particularly when we can do it if we have significant building projects, and what can those companies that are in social value intervention they can bring in, you know, what can they help our less advantaged communities with, what can they bring, what can we sort of assist upon as part of that procurement journey. So I think those are the types of things we're looking for in future strategy. We've got, we've managed to list the top end of suppliers that we use and grade those in terms of how efficient and effective they are with their contracts and their payments, others using local to pay. So that's a great those people. And actually, we've got to make sure I'm not sure how this works, but there's a social value register.
Yes. Yeah.
So we're going through that social value register to make sure that we the suppliers that we want to use, that we know we can use, and just try to extract that by social value whenever we look for a contract. I think that most of this is going to be about locals and looking for me, so making sure we make best use of
That's great. Thank you for that. Thank you. I really appreciate that, and I'm sure that is something that the citizens of Gwent will value as well. So we talk about you know, our citizens. It's not just about the services we provide, but it's how we bring our influence to bear through something like this to deliver benefits for them as well. So thank you very much. I really welcome that. Has anybody else got any questions on that? No. People.
Sorry, can I just interrupt? They can't hear you online. Just don't mind speaking a little bit louder. Don't mind. Sorry. I think that's not the Teams microphone, is it? It's the one by the one here. So.
So yeah, issues for us include people, sickness and absence rates, which we mentioned earlier, and HMIC will bring up there. Diversity and representation, again, we mentioned that earlier. Identifying talent from executive level, right through the organisation, which we're picking up people early. Change management, and again, Chief mentioned that in this big planning, what health and safety, well-being, again, that's Chief's main priorities and plans. So those are the issues which I think the strategy we're trying to wrestle with. And team up with them 5 pillars, if you like, which link to those particular issues. Central matter being culture, which is I think was a directive from the culture strategy, so there's some cross pollination there. So we know we need to be inclusive. Achieving justice inside the organisation helps achieve justice outside the organisation, which drives trust and confidence in the community. So we know that's critical to the Chief Mission and to the justice plan. But essentially, 4 priorities. It's based upon comprehensive health, well-being, and safety, workforce representation, planning, and engaging our people. So those are the priorities. And the strategy gives a narrative about how we intend to do that and what the measure of success will be. In terms of governance, there's a number of governance boards which will oversee and own the strategy, the depth own HR as a work stream, so operationally, also strategically owned there, but operationally owned by the HR department and the research board themselves. The strategic workforce planning board is the overarching board for HR matters, again, chaired by the DEP, will look at finance, workforce planning, recruitment, workforce representation, etc. I look after the people board, that's more an operational board, which is HR operations, talent management, and big into the national talent development strategy, which we recently picked up. Again, health and safety and Welsh language. We've got the engagement boards, 15 chairs, around the employee voice, employee opinion survey, internally and externally. There is a focus on internal engagement in that board. And then I chair also the culture board, which oversees there's an overarching aim around people there, around inclusion, around leadership, and that board helps to escalate issues, puts spotlights on certain issues and try to highlight and prioritize what those other boards are looking at. So there's a number of priority boards which look at it, but overarching received by the debt into the capacity there. So I can go into the detail of the elements if you like, or we just pause there for questions. So I know you're ready to pause.
Do you know what? I did have some questions, but you must be right. Read, you're getting too good at this because you've actually, in giving your overview, you've covered off some of the things that I wanted to ask you in relation to it. But I wanted to say this really positive to see this updated strategy, and And I really welcome the work that's being done around this. And it's another example, isn't it, of, in an organisation, of all the component parts that come together to make the organisation work, so people feel valued, to make sure that you're able to deliver. So I'm really pleased. And I did have some questions around structures and how you know that it's being implemented, but you've covered it off in your overview. So thank you for that. Has anybody else got any questions on that? No? So at this point then, colleagues, that brings to a close the public section of our meeting.